Wayne Patterson in for Hugh Hewitt today as Hugh begins a week-long vacation. We will be joined a little bit later in the week by Mark Davis for a couple of days. Kurt Schlichter will be along tomorrow. I cannot wait to hear what Kurt Schlichter has to say. He having decades of service in the Reserve National Guard, especially after what the president declared today in the Oval Office. We'll get to all that in just a minute. But Kurt is going to be an amazing show tomorrow, so I hope you join us for that. And then I'll be back on Friday to kind of bookend vacation week. Let me catch you up on what's going on. Whenever I have to sit in Hugh's chair, the prayer is always, let there be enough news that it makes it for an easy show. And God answered that prayer. There is all sorts of stuff going on in the news. Some good, some bad, some eyebrow raising. There's a lot of activity going on that you may have missed if you were at work today. And let me bring you up to speed. There's any number of directions we could go that would all be dominating the news cycle. There's obviously the Texas redistricting story, which has been going on now for a couple of weeks, continues to get heated. Governor Greg Abbott is going to just keep declaring special sessions and forcing the Democrats in Texas to stay out of the state and avoid arrest. At the same time going to court and vacating their seats until he has a quorum to be able to move forward with the new maps. Florida is going to apparently go this road. They're going to redistrict. Nebraska's talking about doing it. Indiana's talking about doing it. There are as many as a dozen seats that will be available in the near future for Republicans if they nominate good candidates. So that's still an ongoing saga that's still worthy of talking about. There is a tropical storm that has now formed in the South Atlantic, Eastern Atlantic, named Erin. It is expected to become very soon the first actual named hurricane of the 25 season. Still way too early to track where it's going to go, whether it's going to work its way all the way west and funnel into the Gulf of Mexico, or if it's going to spin off and go into the Northern Atlantic. But we will watch that space because we now are in hurricane season. Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin are expected to have a one-on-one meeting in Alaska at the end of this week. The president had some things to say about what it's going to look like and what he expects. We'll play that from his press conference today in the Jim Brady room. And there was an amazing incident in the South China Sea where a couple of Chinese vessels, one of them was chasing down a Philippines vessel. The Philippines cutter was a Coast Guard ship that was leading a parade of about a dozen fishing vessels through kind of some contested waters. And the CCP, the Chi-Com, started chasing them. Except the Philippines apparently know how to drive boats a lot better than the Chinese do. And they pulled a maneuver, and a Coast Guard vessel of the Chinese ended up T-boning a destroyer. And so it's CCP on CCP crime. It looked like a naval version of a Roadrunner Coyote cartoon. And I'm sure we'll have some B-roll and interesting comments on that from our first guest a little bit later on, Mark C. Montgomery, former two-star admiral. I definitely want to get his take on that. But the big story, of course, is Donald Trump decided enough is enough and invoked Section 740, I believe, maybe 730, of the DC Home Rule Act of 1973, declaring an emergency, saying crime is up too far, too high, there's too much of criminal elements running around, whether it's homeless, encampments, drug use, carjackings, youth violence, gang violence, it's just too much. Donald Trump declared an emergency and basically said, we're taking over because we can. Let's play cut number 5.
I'm announcing a historic action to rescue our nation's capital from crime, bloodshed, bedlam, and squalor. and worse. This is Liberation Day in D.C., and we're going to take our capital back. We're taking it back. Under the authorities vested in me as the President of the United States, I'm officially invoking Section 740 of the District of Columbia Home Rule Act. You know what that is? And placing the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department under direct federal control, and you'll be meeting the people that will be directly involved with that. Very good people, but they're tough, and they know what's happening, and they've done it before. In addition, I'm deploying the National Guard to help reestablish law, order, and public safety in Washington, D.C., and they're going to be allowed to do their job properly.
He teased in that cut that he was going to take over the MPD, the Metropolitan Police Department of the District of Columbia. He went on to spell that out a little bit too, cut number 9.
Today we're declaring public safety emergency in the District of Columbia, and Attorney General Pam Bondi, who's fantastic, is taking command of the Metropolitan Police Department as of this moment. And I'll be making the appropriate notifications to Congress and to the mayor, our new DEA administrator, who's one of the top in the country. He better be Terry. If you're not, I'm going to get rid of you so fast. Terry Cole. Terry, thanks. Very good. We just got him. Most highly recommended person. And you'll be designated as the interim federal commissioner of the Metropolitan Police Department. Okay? And you run them tough. They're good. You have a lot of good people. You have people that shouldn't be there. You also have people that shouldn't be there. They got in there because of woke. But you have a lot of great police. And those people are the ones that want to help you.
The District of Columbia's police department is currently run by Pamela Smith, who is a 24-year veteran of DC-based policing. She ran the Capitol Police for a number of years. She was an officer within the Capitol Police. She was indeed hired in the District of Columbia by the MPD to be a under chief or an executive position in charge of DEI. She was basically an equity officer is how she was hired in 2022. A year later, there was an overturn in the department and she was made chief. And so Donald Trump is technically correct. She is quite literally a DEI hire. She was hired to be a DEI officer before being promoted to be chief of police. Look, there's lots of reaction to this, and the reaction is going to be all over the country to this, both good and bad. Democratic governors, Democratic mayors are all using this to say, see, we told you it was coming. The dictator in him just couldn't help itself. It's coming out. There's lots of people that are saying, look, one of the reasons I voted for this president is because of getting the border under control, getting education reform going, getting tax certainty, but crime stats was right up there. Crime was getting out of control in a lot of big cities all over the country. A lot of it because of the second and third order effects of the illegal immigration that Joe Biden let stream into the country. But part of that is just crime is getting out of control, and the left keeps playing footsies with it, not doing anything about it. Donald Trump finally put his foot down and said, I'm going to, because I can, especially in this city. It's constitutional. I've got the law on my side, and we're going to do it. We'll see what everybody has to say about it, including maybe you a little bit later on. Dwayne Patterson in for Hugh Hewitt. Stick around. We'll be back right after this.
Hold it right there. I'm back from vacation. Not really. I pre-recorded this on Friday. It's my Relief Factor segment because I take Relief Factor with me on vacation, just like I take it every day on this program. And we're going to remind you every hour, even when I'm out on vacation, that Relief Factor does indeed work. If you take it every single day, you will feel much better because it works with your body's anti-inflammatory system to reduce the minor aches and pains that come with exercise and aging. You should be doing the former. You're definitely doing the latter. Every day, Relief Factor means more and more to a comfortable life. Stop using the over-counter meds. Try it the old-fashioned way. Icarian curcumin and resveratrol and omega. And the starter pack, $19.95, gets you 3 weeks of Relief Factor. You take 3 on the first day, every day for the first week, 2 on the second week, every day on the second week, and then 1 on the third week, and then forever after. 1-800, the number 4 in the word relief, 1-800, the number 4 in the word relief, or visit their website, relieffactor.com. Find that starter pack for $19.95, less than $1 a day at relieffactor.com.
I'm joined by one of our regulars on the show, a very valuable asset to deploy on this show. He is a retired 2-star admiral named Mark C. Montgomery. He is the executive director of the Cyberspace Solarium Commission and a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracy. He's a good friend of the show. Welcome back, Admiral. How are you?
Good. Hey, Dwayne, thank you very much for having me. Glad to be here today.
So I know, being a retired admiral, you're going to be loath to talk about politicians and do the politics stuff, and I'm not going to have you do that. But there was a fascinating conversation last week about the Navy and the Indo-PACOM and what to do with China and Taiwan. And there was a lot of thinking going on about where the military-industrial complex is. All that was done with Rahm Emanuel, former 2-term governor of, or mayor of Chicago and former ambassador from Japan. Many people think he's dipping his toe into the water of maybe running for president, maybe not, but at least he's, as an ambassador, he's thinking about the Indo-PACOM and thinking through these issues. I want to play some of that for you, but one of the things that he did say that I don't have a cut for is that, look, we know that the CCP is putting as many boats and holes in the water as fast as possible, but they don't have a history of being able to actually navigate and do naval operations the way the U.S. does, the way the Brits do, the way Australia does, the way a lot of our allies do in the Indo-PACOM region. And he said that last week, and then all of a sudden over the weekend, we have this incident where a Philippine cutter was leading 12 fishing boats through a channel, a passage in the South China Sea, and the CCP were chasing him. And because of a maneuver of the Philippine boat, we had a collision between a CCP destroyer and one of its own Coast Guard ships. Admiral, did you follow? What do you make of this?
Yeah, I did. Well, listen, first of all, I have a lot of time for Ambassador Emanuel. I think he was a very good, Rahm was a very good ambassador in Japan, and more than most was engaged in the challenges we have in the Indo-Pacific and was a frank speaker about it, even if his boss, the president, didn't necessarily appreciate it. So I think he was fantastic, and in that regard. So I have a lot of time for what he says, and he was right in predicting this. The Chinese Coast Guard has gotten very big very fast. In fact, they have a Coast Guard ship that's bigger than that Navy destroyer. That isn't what was involved in this case. It was a smaller Coast Guard ship, but you've got hundreds of Coast Guard ships, hundreds of PLA Navy ships, 1,000 military militia ships that are out there operating, all of them with varying degrees of professionalism. Now, I will tell you, this maneuver you see right here is very unprofessional. That was it appeared to be the destroyer cutting in front of the bow of the small cutter, the Coast Guard cutter, and neither ship did well. But I definitely saw, unfortunately, a lot of sailors, a number of sailors on each ship in the proximity of the contact. Now, the good news is, in those parts of the ship, there usually aren't that many people in the actual confines of the ship, so hopefully not too many people were lost. But you could see some serious damage.
That's Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner stuff, boat edition, right?
It is, except that Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner were not on the same side, And
well, that's true. That's true.
That's unprofessional. Listen, our ships have complained about this during freedom of navigation operations. What that destroyer did is not uncommon. Now, we have very good ship handlers, and we're at our highest level of navigation detail when we're doing a freedom of navigation transit. And we get that kind of unprofessional, borderline, what we'd say, BS activity by their Navy. And in this case, the cutter didn't expect it. They did not expect that maneuver from their own Navy. And both bridges lost situational awareness, but particularly the destroyer's bridge, I think. And you got this casualty. The Philippines have nothing to do with this casualty. I mean, they're proximate. They filmed it, but the two ships responsible for this are the cutter and the Navy, the Coast Guard, Chinese Coast Guard cutter, and the Chinese Navy destroyer, both of which were in repeated significant violations of the rule of the sea. Yeah. And in the end, they paid the price. And I think some Chinese sailors probably paid the ultimate price there.
That actually would not surprise me one bit. I want to shift while we have a couple minutes left to the interview that Hugh did with Rahm Emanuel. I want to play you one clip from that interview talking about Japan's military-industrial complex versus ours, and whether it might be more strategic to let some of the repairs of our current ships be done over in Japan and maybe have them build the hulls and do the retrofitting and Aegis stuff here. Here is Rahm Emanuel, cut number 2, Harley.
Look, I mean, I wrote about this, so I want to give a point out to something. The United States were all responsible for both parties, both political class and commercial class, for allowing our military-industrial capacity to shrivel over the years post-Cold War. We overshot the runway from 55 companies to 5 big ones. We didn't get efficiency. We got rewarding, over budget, and behind schedule. No other business professional, besides the military-industrial complexes of the United States, have we rewarded year in and year out failure. So in my view, we've talked about it. Ban for 7 years all corporate stock buyback until they fix on time and on budget. And Japan does that. I went personally with Del Toro, the former Secretary of Navy, to see Mitsubishi production, their capacity. They could tell you 3 years from now which screw will be put in which base on what hour of the Tuesday of the 3rd week of November. And they've never been behind budget or behind schedule the way that the United States has. Nowhere close.
Mark Montgomery, we could spend an hour on this. We could spend 3 hours on this. I got a minute and a half. What do you make of this?
So I agree with them. It's a disaster. You can build a logistics ship, not a warship, a logistics ship, for about 28 cents on the dollar in Korea, as you can in the United States. And I think it'd be slightly more than that, maybe 32 or 35 cents on the dollar in Japan. It's a lot of things drive that: industrial base inefficiency, aging infrastructure, union fees. They all come together to triple or quadruple the price of the hulls of our ships versus our Asian allies. And look, let's be the truthful thing. He mentioned Navy Secretary Del Toro. He actually said we ought to do something with Korea, and he was beaten heavily by the Biden Defense Department. The Deputy Secretary Kath Hicks and the Secretary told him to take a big can of shut the heck up and sit in a corner and not say that again out loud. So this is a problem. We absolutely have to fix it. There's a lot of ways to tackle it, but the most important in my mind is to introduce a little bit of risk taking into the system. Part of what's going on here with the stock buybacks and other things is eliminating all the risk in the system. So I'm excited to get this right. But he's right. We're going to have some serious changes.
And I'm in agreement with that too. I'm glad to hear you say that. Read more of what Admiral Montgomery has to say at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. You can follow him on X at Mark C. Montgomery. Thank you, Admiral. I appreciate it. We'll talk to you next week. The best song the Dave Matthews Band ever put out, Ants Marching. Wonderful song there. Welcome back, everybody. Dwayne Patterson in for Hugh Hewitt today. Let's do the market update as long as we're just before the market closing, and remind you that the market update on the Hugh Hewitt Show is brought to you by AmericanFederal.com. They, of course, do a lot of gold and bullion and coins and all sorts of things, precious metals. You can call them at 800-221-7694, 800-221-7694. Or you can go to AmericanFederal.com and check in with Nick Rovich and his team. The market had a very interesting day today so far. Gold kind of took a pretty big dip. It's down almost $90. from its open. The overall market is kind of still in the summer doldrums. Dow's off, I don't know, 100 or so, but fairly light trading. It usually is in the summer, and we'll see how things go in the fall when some more economic data and activity picks back up. But everybody's on vacation. A lot of people are not really doing as much in the market as they did earlier in the year. So things are just kind of a little soft right now. But gold took a pretty big dip. And it's interesting to time it with what one of the tweets and True Socials that Donald Trump came out with today, which is he announced that there will be no all caps, there will be no tariffs on gold. Okay, that's interesting. I didn't know there was going to be tariffs on gold, or why there would be, or what the purpose would be. But Nick Grovich and his team can help unwind all this. And maybe it being down 89 is a buy point for you. Give American Federal a call, 800-221-7694, or go to AmericanFederal.com. Let's get back to the White House press room. And the James Brady press room is not a big room. The White House is a 3-story mansion. It's a big building, right? But the press room is actually, relatively speaking, a pretty tiny little room. And after the president over the weekend dropped all sorts of hints online that he was going to do exactly what he did today, federalizing the District of Columbia and taking over the police department and calling out the National Guard, the press room was packed to the gills today. I mean, packed to the gills today. Everybody wanted White House access to listen to what Donald Trump had to say. And one of the reporters kind of teasingly asked the president, well, why didn't we do this in the East Room? Why don't we do this in a bigger room where we can be more comfortable? Donald Trump had this to say, cut number 4.
My question is this. You're building a big, beautiful ballroom.
Yeah.
Could we build a big, beautiful briefing room, updated technology, more seats?
I don't want to do that. I don't want you to be comfortable. So no, I don't want to make life comfortable.
I don't want to make life too comfortable for you people. I don't like you that much. It's vintage Donald Trump. But then he started to explain why he's doing what he's doing. Cut number 6.
It's a very, very strong reflection of our country. And when they see a bad city, my father always used to tell me, I had a wonderful father, very smart. And he used to say, son, when you walk into a restaurant and you see a dirty front door, don't go in. Because if the front door is dirty, the kitchen's dirty also. Same thing with the Capitol. If our Capitol's dirty, our whole country is dirty.
He continued. He was bringing shame upon the leadership of D.C. for him even having to do this. Cut number 11.
This is a tragic emergency. And it's embarrassing for me to be up here. I'm going to see Putin. I'm going to Russia on Friday. I don't like being up here talking about how unsafe and how dirty and disgusting this once beautiful Capitol was, with graffiti all over the walls. It's another part of it, by the way, because we're talking about safety, but we're also talking about beautification. We have the most beautiful, potentially, Capitol in the world. We always had.
He also had this to say, cut number 10.
Every American has a constitutional right to be able to access and petition their government in safety, and countless federal officials and employees likewise have the right to carry out their jobs in peace without being shot. As you know, I lost a very good person a while ago, was shot waiting for his wife. He was in the car. They robbed his car. They shot him. They killed him like it was nothing to it. She was walking to the car. It's a horror show. This issue directly impacts the functioning of the federal government and is a threat to America, really. It's a threat to our country.
Once again, Donald Trump has taken an 80-20 issue, maybe a 90-10 issue, and forcing the Democrats to take the side of the criminals, to defend the criminality in D.C. We are going to be joined in just a little bit by Dr. Michael Oren, and I'm not quite sure where he's at, but we will... Actually, we may actually have him now. Dr. Oren, can you hear me okay?
You got me. We're good. Hi, Dwayne.
So where do we find you today?
In Florida.
Oh, in Florida. Well, of
Okay.
course.
Happens.
It happens. Dr. Michael Oren, of course, former Israeli ambassador to the U.S., Wilson Center senior fellow, and all-around good guy, and knows virtually everything that's going on about Israeli politics, much more than some American guy like me is ever going to know. I want to play you just one clip, and then I want to dive into kind of where the politics are of Bibi Netanyahu's takeover of Gaza, or plan to take over Gaza, and what that's going to look like, and what the short, medium, and long-term ramifications are. We'll cover that in a second. But over the weekend, lost in all the other news, on CNN, Dana Bash interviewed Bernie Sanders of Vermont, Senator. And I know you don't like talking about American politics, and I get that.
Fine.
But Bernie Sanders had something to say that really kind of blew me away. Cut number 27, Harley.
Would you say Hamas has some culpability in people starving?
No.
Why?
This is
when they spent so much money building tunnels and everything under
so
the
right now, what is going on is a slaughter. All right. And right now, Israel is, with
Michael Oren, I can't even with these people that look at the people that actually committed the attack on October 7th and still have hostages in the tunnel, and they have no culpability for what's going on in Gaza today. I don't even know how you explain this to the world when you've got that kind of craziness.
Bernie Sanders inhabits a different universe, a different reality than we have. And we can't afford to spend time and energy trying to somehow correct or amend his universe, which is deeply, deeply perverse and broken. It's simply broken. It's morally broken. We don't have time. We're fighting a war of national survival. And I think Bernie Sanders is much more of a symptom of a malaise that has occurred across American politics. So you have the Democratic Party voting last week to withhold arms shipments to Israel. You've got a candidate for the mayoralty of New York, the second largest Jewish city on earth, who basically will not condemn the slogan from,
Globalize the Intifada.
Globalize the Intifada, the Intifada that killed 1,000 of my country people, that killed my sister-in-law. Globalize it, coming to a neighborhood near you. This is more symptomatic of what's happening in America and not what's happening in Israel. We inherit a very, very different reality. And our reality is sufficiently complex and fraught and controversial enough without getting involved in America's reality.
Fair enough. Let's talk about your reality right now. Benjamin Netanyahu has presented a plan to occupy Gaza and clean out Hamas once and for all, at least from what reports are here. And his goal long term, in an interview with Bill Hemmer on Fox News last week, the long term goal is to eventually bring in some kind of Arab consortium or mix to be able to kind of police the strip and just not have Hamas involved in it. Short term, medium term, long term. Is it efficacious? Is it possible? Is it doable? Is it the smart way to go, Michael Oren?
Let's start from the 30,000 foot view, Dwayne, and that is, what are Israel's options at this point? 74% of the Israeli population want to end the war and want a deal where Israel withdraw from Gaza and Hamas is going to give us back all of the hostages. There's just one minor problem with that, and that is Hamas is never going to give us back all the hostages. They are evil, but they are not stupid. And they know that the minute they give us back the last hostage, that is when the IDF goes in and destroys them finally. So they're always going to hold on to several hostages for, quote unquote, a rainy day. And they may say, oh, we don't know where they are. And then we'll find out later that we do know where they are, and they're in the hands of Hamas. That option. We're also dealing with an enemy for whom death is a logical option. In the West, we're not used to negotiating with people for whom we'll say, oh, listen, if we don't get our way, we'd rather die. You don't really have that many people in the West like that anymore, but that's very common among Hamas. And, to say to them, hey, listen, we'll give you a free boat ride out of Gaza. You can go wherever you want. You can go to Algeria. You can go to Turkey. I can think of a couple of towns that I grew up in New Jersey that'd be happy to have them. They'd kill them. But they won't take that. They'd rather die. They'd rather die than go down in Muslim history as the people who ran away with the tails between their legs. They'd rather die. So that is a very difficult situation. Then it begs the question, so what are Israel's options? So one option, if a negotiated option is not an option, then you say either you do one of two things. You either do what the army wants to do, what the IDF wants to do, is to circle Gaza City. That's the last 25% of Gaza where Hamas is basically battened down and where they have the hostages. And then you do daily raids inside and you keep the pressure on from the sky and you keep whatever degree of food pressure you can put on them, which is not very much right now. And you hope that Hamas will eventually reach a deal. Or you go in. And you go in full force, and you do what Israel did in 1956 when it conquered Gaza in a day. You do what we did in 1967 when the Israeli army conquered Gaza in a day and a half. You send in 100,000 soldiers, and you do this quickly. And then there are three dangers. One, that you're going to kill a great number of Palestinian civilians, and you know what that does to our position in the world. Two, you're going to lose a lot of soldiers. And that's almost guaranteed. And three, that Hamas won't release the hostages; it will shoot the hostages, because that is what it has done in the past. When Hamas has its back against the wall, it doesn't release hostages; it executes them. So there is no good option here. There are only worse and more nightmarish options.
Yeah, there's the least worst options is really the only options you have. But just as a dumb American here, you're standing in the world. The world doesn't like you. The world hates you. The world has always hated you. So what if you go in and do what needs to be done? Why would you care now about the world's going to say?
Well, that is certainly an Israeli reaction, and they've already accused us of everything they can possibly accuse us of genocide, starvation. What else can they possibly accuse us of that they haven't done this and established it as fact, by the way? And so here you have it. The problem is that Netanyahu is not making that entire decision. He's saying, well, the army is going to go in, but it's only going to go in very, very slowly, house by house, street by street. So he's really trying to take a middle position. I mean, I would prefer. It's
really hard, Michael. Michael, we're up against the break.
Let's do it.
We'll be back right after this. Dwayne in for Hugh. Stick around. I haven't even scratched the surface of available video from the White House press room today, and we've still got 2 hours together. I've got lots that we're going to play for you, all the good stuff, the bad stuff, the Russia stuff, the funny, all that stuff is still going to unfold as the show progresses. But the reaction to it, both for it and against it, is pretty remarkable too. Tom Cotton, our good friend, senator from Arkansas, the chairman of the Senate Intel Committee, was on Fox News when Donald Trump did this press conference, and here's how Senator Cotton talked about it. Cut 22.
Well, I'm glad to hear Mayor Bowser realizes that crime is out of control in Washington, D.C. It's more dangerous in our nation's capital than it is in the capitals of many third world countries. I unfortunately have had congressional staff and interns up in Washington who themselves have been victimized by violent crime. A couple times a year when I do onboard briefings for my interns, I have to regrettably explain to them that it's a dangerous city and they need to be aware of their surroundings and probably travel with other people as well. So President Trump is right that we have to get crime under control. Washington, D.C. is not like any other city in the country. It is the federal city. It is our nation's capital. That's why our founding fathers gave the federal government exclusive control over this city. And President Trump, I think, is rightly going to use the National Guard, the FBI, the DEA, the Park Police, and other federal law enforcement to augment the D.C. police to get crime under control so it's once again safe for thousands of Arkansans and millions of Americans to come visit our nation's capital every year.
Meanwhile, again, that's what you get out of Tom Cotton. Absolute, clear-eyed, sober, clear policy and analysis. He is absolutely spot on. Now contrast that with how our friends over on CNN covered the story. Dana Bash was hosting a panel, and here's what she had to say. Cut number 23.
And just as we go to break, I should note that the most violent moment in recent history in D.C. was January 6th. And it was an attack on the United States Capitol by a lot of people who were doing it in the name of Donald Trump. And it included, the people who were hurt included members of law enforcement.
Yes, Dana Bash has to remind you that crime's not so bad now. Don't worry about the stabbings. Don't worry about the people that were murdered in front of the Holocaust Museum. Forget all that. J6 was worse. It's always worse with J6 because Trump. The Washington Post has a piece by Olivia George. John D. Harden, Jenny Gathright says, Trump says crime in D.C. is out of control. Here's what the data shows. You go 29 out of 30 paragraphs in the story. The last 2 paragraphs of this full story. This is a safe city, but overhearing and witnessing gang threats and then watching the camera footage of the thuggery is disturbing, said one resident, speaking on the condition of anonymity over concerns of personal safety. The language Trump uses to describe D.C. is wrong, he said. But clearly there is something bad going on that needs to stop. Well, Trump is stopping it. It took 30 graphs for the Post to get there. It's unbelievable. Dwayne Patterson in for Hugh Hewitt today. Hugh is off on vacation. I will be joining you today and Friday. Mark Davis will be along from AM 660, The Answer in Dallas on Wednesday and Thursday. And the one, the only, Kurt Schlichter will be joining us tomorrow. I'm sure he will have some things to say about Trump and the feds using the National Guard to take over D.C. and police the district because D.C. can't seem to do it themselves. There is another event that's going on as we speak, about 20 miles south of Pittsburgh in a little industrial town called Clarenton, not too far away from our friend Selena Zito. And this is the home of a coke production plant of U.S. Steel. Coke, of course, being kind of a dual ingredient in the steelmaking process. It helps the furnace get hotter, burning hotter to be able to, get the steel the way you want it. It also serves as a deoxidizing agent to kind of make the molten steel burn cleaner and dense and gets all the oxides out of it. Well, this coke manufacturing facility in Clarenton had a level 3 explosion a little bit earlier today. It is an active rescue operation, and there are reports of, at least according to the BBC, at least one fatality. There may be as many 1 or 2 other people that are missing. There are a handful of people that are under the rubble as they are trying to clear the debris and get people out of there and tend to whatever injuries they may have. But it is a serious event, warrants some attention and prayer, and we are going to follow that story very, very closely. But it has, in the last hour and a half, apparently become a fatal accident because at least one person has lost their life there at that U.S. Steel plant. So our thoughts and prayers to the families involved, and I'm going to be following our friend Selena Zito, who will be probably there very soon, if not already. And on X, she will probably be updating us very, very soon and with her usual skill. Let's get back to what took place at the White House today, because that really is the biggest story in the country today. Donald Trump announcing enough is enough. I'm declaring a state of emergency in the District of Columbia. Crime is off the charts, and it needs to be reined in. The 1973 Congressional Act ceding its authority, its constitutional authority, over the District of Columbia to civilian control. They put a clause in there, though, Section 740, which allows, in case of emergency, if things get out of hand, the feds are going to come back in and take it over. And that's exactly what Donald Trump did. Here is what he had to say about what else is on tap as far as what the cleanup is going to look like. Cut number 8.
We're going to be removing homeless encampments from all over our parks, our beautiful, beautiful parks, which now a lot of people can't walk on. They're very dirty, we got a lot of problems. But we've already started that. We're moving the encampments away, trying to take care of people. Some of those people, we don't know how they even got there. Some of those people are from different countries, different parts of the world. Nobody knows who they are. They have no idea, but they're there. We're getting rid of the people from underpasses and public spaces from all over the city. There are many places that they can go, and we're going to help them as much as you can help. But they'll not be allowed to turn our capital into a wasteland for the world to see.
He also went on to say there are some parts of the city that have turned into slums, and he doesn't like that much. He's going to clean that up. Cut number 12.
It's becoming a situation of complete and total lawlessness, and we're getting rid of the slums, too. We have slums here. We're getting rid of them. I know it's not politically correct. You'll say, oh, so terrible. No, we're getting rid of the slums where they live.
He addressed the overflow crowd in the Jim Brady press room and noted the political leanings of virtually everybody in the room, and yet speaks the truth to what all of them believe, regardless of what their politics are. Cut number 13.
I understand a lot of you tend to be on the liberal side, but you don't want to get mugged and raped and shot and killed. And you all know people and friends of yours that happened. And so you can be anything you want, but you want to have safety in the streets. You want to be able to leave your apartment or your house where you live and feel safe and go into a store to buy a newspaper or buy something. And you don't have that now. The murder rate in Washington today is higher than that of Bogota, Colombia, Mexico City, some of the places that you hear about as being the worst places on earth, much higher. This is much higher. The number of car thefts has doubled over the past 5 years, and the number of carjackings has more than tripled. Murders in 2023 reached the highest rate probably ever. They say 25 years, but they don't know what that means because it just goes back 25 years. Can't be worse. Our capital city has been overtaken by violent gangs and bloodthirsty criminals, roving mobs of wild youth, drugged out maniacs and homeless people. And we're not going to let it happen anymore. We're not going to take it.
I've got to go back and find this. While I was watching Donald Trump speak about what's going on in D.C., it reminded me, there's a clip back there. I have this in the back of my head. Andrea Mitchell was doing a remote shot. This is probably during, the fall of the 2024 campaign cycle, maybe a little earlier than that. But Andrea Mitchell was doing a street shot on NBC News. Maybe it was MSNBC. And she had her camera crew around her. She was standing, the Black Lives Matter was in the street in large yellow paint font. And she was standing there and she was reacting to something in the news where Donald Trump had said how crime was up in D.C. Now I'm going to fix it one day, and campaign promises and slogans. And Andrea Mitchell was there to do this. Oh, it's fine here. See, there's no crime here. It's not bad. He's making all this up. And her camera crew got mugged during the shot. And they had private security there that had to be engaged to try to take on and got into a fight with people trying to mug them as they were doing this remote shot. Look, this is not a secret. Everybody in D.C. knows that the city has degraded in safety. I remember going back to D.C. when I first got into doing radio on the Salem Radio Network. And, of course, now we're on the Salem News Channel. But I remember 30 years ago when we were doing this job, I went back to D.C., and I rode the metro everywhere, the subway, because it was clean. It got you efficiently wherever you wanted to go throughout the city, and it worked. I wouldn't go on the metro now if I had if I had your money, I wouldn't go on the metro. It's just not a safe place to be. And everybody in town knows this. So they're trying to cherry pick and say, well, crime is down, there's no emergency. Well, compared to data that's 3 years old or 4 years old. You go back 10 years, the number of homicides in D.C. in the early teens was like 89, 90 a year. It's over 200 annually now. The Democrats are taking the side of the murderers. They're taking the sides of the criminals and saying, oh, but it's down. It's not as high as it was a couple of years ago. It's 3 times what it was just 10 years ago. The population of the city hasn't increased by 3 times. Do the math. It's time. This is a good thing. Donald Trump needs to take it over. Dwayne Patterson in for Hugh Hewitt. We'll be back right after this. Stick around.
Hold it right there. I'm back from vacation. Not really. I pre-recorded this on Friday. It's my Relief Factor segment because I take Relief Factor with me on vacation, just like I take it every day on this program. And we're going to remind you every hour, even when I'm out on vacation, that Relief Factor does indeed work. If you take it every single day, you will feel much better because it works with your body's anti-inflammatory system to reduce the minor aches and pains that come with exercise and aging. You should be doing the former. You're definitely doing the latter. Every day, Relief Factor means more and more to a comfortable life. Stop using the over-counter meds. Try it the old-fashioned way. Icarian curcumin with Veratron Omega and the starter pack, $19.95, gets you 3 weeks of Relief Factor. You take 3 on the first day, every day for the first week, 2 on the second week, every day on the second week, and then 1 on the third week, and then forever after. 1-800, the number 4 in the word relief, 1-800, the number 4 in the word relief, or visit their website, relieffactor.com. Find that starter pack for $19.95, less than $1 a day at relieffactor.com.
Joined by M.K. Hammer. Mary Catherine Ham is the host of the Normally podcast, the Getting Hammered podcast, except Mary Catherine, I think I'm going to demand that Donald Trump invoke Section 740 of the Getting Hammered agreement and federalize the podcast so that we get it back in production again. On behalf of all Americans.
I don't know if I can morally take federal funding, so I guess he could just order me to do it. I don't know if he has that authority.
Will it work? Will it get you finally back behind the microphone?
It's very kind of you to push, though. I don't know if Mr. Trump would agree to it.
Well, he might not, but still, it would be fun to get you back in the game again doing the.
Thank you. I'm working on it.
Okay, fair enough. So let's talk about the takeover. What says Mary Catherine Ham about the takeover? Look, he campaigned on it, and crime was it was one of the big 5 on the issue sets that a lot of suburban moms voted for him again.
Well, here's the thing, is that because DC, as always, because it is a federal district and not a state, and a partnership between local authorities and feds, he has more power here than he would have other places where you have to work in concert with the governor, for instance, on National Guard, more than you would have to here, where he has more power. There's always been like a gentleman's agreement that, hey, this is part federal city that we control and part local stuff that you guys control. But if y'all's part gets out of hand, then the federal government is going to want to do more. And despite the 1973 bill passed by Congress that allows DC home control, Congress can also overturn a bunch of DC rules if they want to. And so, you're in a situation where the local governance doesn't have as much control as it would otherwise. So he has certain powers here. There is a situation in DC, as there was in many major American cities, that I don't know why they decided in 2020 that they would devolve to the point of like committing suicide as a municipality. But nobody could commute to their cities for work. They shut everything down for extended periods of time, including schools. They hurt a bunch of people doing so. Crime went up. They embraced BLM and defund the police, and it led to terrible, terrible outcomes for the people who live in DC and for the people who go back and forth between DC, or even tourists who come to visit, right? Because some of that crime spreads out. They have gotten slightly better, but the bar was in hell. The bar was 2023, where you had almost 40 per 100K homicides in the city. So yes, numbers have come down, but they came down from an insane high.
It went from hell to Hades, right? It went from the ninth circle of hell to the 7th, right? Right. It's slightly better, but it's still a big problem when you compare it to other third world capital cities in those countries. But look, Mary Catherine, to me, this is another issue where it's an 80-20 issue. It may be a 90-10 issue. People honestly don't like being mugged. I'm just here to shed truth on it. Most people don't like getting shot, stabbed, and mugged. People tend to frown on that when it happens to them. Now, they may like it if it's part of an overall policy or a feel-good, bleeding heart agenda, but most people are anti-mugging when they are the ones being mugged. But it doesn't stop Donald Trump from taking this issue and having a bunch of Democrats, a bunch of media types, all of a sudden taking that 10%, taking that 20% hill and dying on it because Donald Trump is on the other side of the issue. Dana Bash, our friend on CNN, we've both known Dana Bash 4 Dana Bashes ago, right? We've known her a long time. Here was Dana Bash after Donald Trump's press conference talking about why he had to do what he had to do. Cut 23.
And it just, as we go to break, I should note that the most violent moment in recent history in D.C. was January 6th. And it was an attack on the United States Capitol by a lot of people who were doing it in the name of Donald Trump. And it included, the people who were hurt included members of law enforcement.
Mary Catherine, honest to goodness, where do you even go with this?
I mean, like, look, if you lived through 2020 in and around the city, you know that's not even technically the case. Like, there were a lot of nights that things were very, very bad. And that doesn't mean that January 6th was good. It's just like, hey, we have an agreement here where, by the way, we're going to be doing the 250th celebration of the country. And I think Donald Trump takes that pretty personally because he's going to be overseeing it. And a lot of people are going to be coming to the city. And the truth is,
it's a big show. It's going to be a big... It's going to be a big show, and that's the one thing that Donald Trump wants to be able to put on is a big show, and you can't have a bunch of homeless encampments.
Exactly. Well, and I've lived in the area for many years now, more than I like to admit, and going back and forth between the city throughout, and it does feel different than it did 7 years ago, 5 years ago. There are many more homeless encampments. They are in more obvious places. They've been cleared out basically since Trump got to town in some more obvious places, like out front of Union Station, where there used to be a giant one. A lot changed in that 2020 to 2023 period for the worse in DC. And no, it is not the face that you want to put on when you're presenting yourself to the nation for its 250th. I don't think he wants that. I think it got personal with the Doge employee, also known as Big Balls, who got mugged or carjacked and attacked by a group of teenagers in Adams Morgan, which is not a super dangerous part of the city. That's up in Northwest. Where he got attacked and hurt by, I think, sounds like valiantly protecting his significant other in that situation. And he doesn't want his people messed with like that. He doesn't want to be in a city that allows that. And it's interesting to me, Muriel Bowser, who's the mayor, was on MSNBC this weekend on Sunday saying, look, I've talked to him throughout his tenure this time. We've been on the phone. We're making improvements. We still have improvements to make. I thought it was interesting that she was signaling that that line of communication was open and she wanted it open. It was so different from Trump 1.0 with her. And I think it's homing in on what you're saying, which is like people are just fed up with the crime, and she knows that, and she's acknowledging that she needs to do something about it.
Absolutely. The Washington Post, you flagged this story for me as an A.G. Hamilton 29 post. But the Washington Post came out with a bit about how D.C. crime is out of control, at least so says Trump. Here's what the data actually shows, and it tries to minimize it all. You get 29 graphs out of 30, MK. 29th graph, quote, this is a safe city. But overhearing and witnessing gang threats and then watching the camera footage of the thuggery is disturbing, said one resident, speaking on the condition of anonymity over concerns of personal safety. The crowd of teens, he said, were roaming the street and appeared to be checking for unlocked cars and things to steal.
Oops. They don't even know they're telling on themselves. But there is a large problem with youth criminality. And this is not to say that, like, the hammer needs to come down on every single offender every single time and derail these people's lives. But I do think what the message was sent was that if you are young if you're a minor, you can get away with basically anything in this city, and we're going to let you off the hook. And that meant that you created and incentivized more criminals who are minors, who then derail their whole lives doing this. It's a terrible idea.
10-second out question. How long before we see tangible improvement in the District of Columbia? Weeks, months, days?
I think this
How long?
story, it'll be effective. It'll last about 4 days, the story, because no one will want to talk about it afterwards because it'll work.
See, I think so too. MK Hammer on Twitter X. Someday soon, maybe through an executive order, coming back to getting hammered. I knew it was coming. It took an hour and a half of me guest hosting before I got my goose fix. Thank you, Adam Youngman. Welcome back, everybody. Dwayne Patterson in for Hugh today as he begins his summer vacation and leaves me with a whole pile of news. And we will continue to march through that. But I want to take a minute and talk to you about one of our sponsors, Consumer Cellular. 800-411-4454. That's 800-411-4454. Or you can go to consumercellular.com/Hugh. Now, why would you do that? Let's say you're in D.C. Let's say you're somebody that has to commute into the city every day. And you may not have thought about your safety much before, and whether you want to go into the city with all your worldly possessions, and maybe you want to leave all that stuff behind and just kind of get in and out. Well, in a few days, few weeks, few months, however long it takes, you know, it may be a lot easier to kind of walk around the city and kind of enjoy life. And you may have a little time on your hands. You may be able to look around and say, hey, you know, why am I spending all this time on all this extra data that I don't really use and need? Maybe I ought to take a look at something different, like Consumer Cellular. If you spend about 20 minutes and you just kind of analyze your bill, you can go to consumercellular.com/Hugh, and you can get $25 off if you use the promo code HUGH25. And new customers get a $5 credit on their first 5 monthly invoices. ConsumerCellular.com is where you can get 2 unlimited lines for $60, $30 a line unlimited. But you can probably save yourself hundreds of dollars if you just kind of take a look at what your data usage is compared to what you really need. But check it out, consumercellular.com/Hugh, or call 800-411-4454. So let's get back to the press conference. There was a couple other things that Donald Trump had to say about Russia in his call coming up on Friday, or his meeting with Vladimir Putin in Alaska. And here is what Donald Trump had to say about what his prospects are of how this meeting is going to go. Cut number 15.
Well, we're going to have a meeting with Vladimir Putin, and at the end of that meeting, probably in the first 2 minutes, I'll know exactly whether or not a deal can be made. How will you know that? Because that's what I do. I make deals.
I'll know in 2 minutes of sitting down with Vladimir Putin if he's serious or not, if we're going to be able to have a deal or not. He's probably right, actually. He probably will be able to tell in the first couple minutes whether Putin's serious or not. Cut number 16.
I'm going to meet with him. We're going to see what the parameters are. I'm then going to call up President Zelensky and the European leaders right after the meeting, yeah. And I'm going to tell them what kind of a deal. I'm not going to make a deal. It's not up to me to make a deal. I think a deal should be made for both. I think Russia has to get back into building their country. It's a massive country. I think they have 11 time zones, if you can believe it. It's a massive, it's by far, from the standpoint of land, it's by far the largest. They have tremendous potential in Russia to do well. They're not doing well. Their economy is not doing well right now because it's been very well disturbed by this. It doesn't help when the President of the United States tells their largest or second largest oil buyer that we're putting a 50% tariff on you if you buy oil from Russia. That was a big blow. And then they say, gee, he wasn't so tough. Nobody else would have done that. And I haven't stopped there. I mean, look, I was all set to do things far bigger than that, but I got a call that they'd like to meet, and I'm going to see what they want to meet about. I'd like to see a ceasefire. I'd like to see the best deal that could be made for both parties. You know, it takes two to tango, right?
So what is he talking about there? The second biggest country. He's talking about India. And India was continuing to buy Russian oil. Donald Trump said, 3-4 weeks ago, that 80% of Russia's oil exports, their three biggest customers, are Brazil, India, and China. Now, China is its own animal, and he's still negotiating with China because they're a near peer competitor / adversary, and he's got to deal with them. But India is wanting a trade deal and wants access to the U.S. market, and Donald Trump is putting the squeeze on him right now. And he's saying, you're going to quit buying from Russia, and you're going to buy your oil, you're going to buy energy from us instead. And India's resisting, and that's why Trump slapped a 50% tariff on him. He's also gone after Brazil very quietly last week, slapping a tariff on Brazil goods coming into the U.S. Brazil has to have the U.S. market too. It's very likely that they're going to roll over pretty soon. You already signed this EU deal that's going to have $750 billion worth of the EU buying American liquefied natural gas. Donald Trump is squeezing Putin to come to the table. We'll see real quick if he's serious. Joined by the other miscreant, the other Texas Democrat flea-bagging away from responsibilities on the Getting Hammered podcast. That would be Vic Mattis at Victorino Mattis. He also is the weekend editor of the Free Beacon, which is gainful employment. Welcome, Vic. Good to have you back on.
Hello, Dwayne. Glad to be back on your show today.
Exactly. So let's get into the reaction. I mean, I'll give you your time on the floor to be able to kind of tell me what you think about Donald Trump and the feds taking over DC. But I just want to kind of give you some of the reaction from our friends on the left, because it's unfolding in real time, and it's just kind of too delicious not to. Eugene Daniels is the president of the White House Correspondents Association, and he's a host on MSNBC. Brought on Muriel Bowser, the mayor of the district, and said that Donald Trump is trying to bring down DC's crime rate because he's racist against black people. Because apparently that somehow makes logistical sense. Also on MSNBC, Eddie Glaude Jr., another contributor to the network, had this to say after the press conference, cut 25.
Chris, to be honest with you, I'm trying to hold my temper. I think that's an ongoing argument that he's having in his head with Black Lives Matter. There's an ongoing argument that he's having with the questions around criminal justice reform and police reform. It's interesting that he really doesn't really care about what's actually happening in D.C. on a certain level, because he's not trying to get at the underlying root causes. He's not looking at examples of how to address rising crime rates that doesn't require a form of policing that leads to increased incarcerality and the like. Let's look at what's going on in Baltimore. Let's look at what's happening actually in places like Baltimore and Chicago, right? So part of what we have to do is to understand. And Oakland. We have to understand this, Chris, within the context of Donald Trump's racial politics and within the context of his effort to get Epstein off the front pages. I understand David's point. But when we try to treat this as a rational response, then we lose sight of the actual politics that's being played here. And he's actually trying to give his base red meat to get them off of the Epstein story, and it's on the backs of citizens in Washington, D.C. He's going to undermine the democratic process in the district.
Vic Mattis, the actual politics of this are Donald Trump has done it again. He's taken an 80-20, a 90-10 issue, and he's taken the 80 or 90%, and he's forced Democrats to take the 10% of the country that's pro-crime, pro-criminal. What do you make of this?
Yeah, I've always said if Donald Trump comes out in support of water as being vital to our existence, they would come out with pieces saying that water is bad for you, or same thing with air. I think it's more telling, rather than trying to get into President Trump's mind, I think it's more telling what's going on in Eddie Glaude's mind, which is everything revolves around this racial conspiracy. I love the idea that, the city's that the city, first of all, that the Epstein files are more important than what's happening in the District of Columbia. That's the first thing. And the second thing, I like the idea that DC's motto should be like, at least we're not Baltimore. That's a great thing to run on. But what they seem to be ignoring is the crime statistics. They keep on talking about how it's plummeting. You're comparing it to 2023 and before that, which in 2023, crime spiked in some cases like carjackings by 82%. So when you're saying that it's dropping by a large number, you're only going down to the base level, which is not zero. It was already bad before that. And so that's one thing. And then the other thing, of course, is, there was an MPD commander, and this was reported in NBC4, I'm sure you've spoken about this, who was suspended for allegedly fudging the numbers on crime statistics because there are loopholes in the way you report them to the FBI. Our Alana Goodman has a piece out right now at this very moment at freebeacon.com breaking all that down. So the mainstream has no qualms citing these numbers without any caveats that these numbers might not be so reliable.
So I asked Mary Catherine this just as an out question. I'm going to give you a little more time to react to it. So how long do you think this is going to be a story? Meaning, this is going to, when Donald Trump sends in the feds and the National Guard are on the streets this week and order begins to be restored, Pam Bondi is going to be the de facto chief of police, and Jeanine Pirro is going to start cracking down on prosecutions. It's going to get cleaned up, right? And life is going to improve in DC. It may be a couple of weeks, it may be a month, it may be 2 or 3 months, but what Donald Trump did for the border, he's going to do for the District of Columbia. And when that happens, and life is better in DC, the story's going to disappear, right? I mean, it's going to be off the front lines in a real big hurry because it's effective, what he's trying to do, right?
Yeah. On the one hand, they're going to express the outrage that he's federalizing a district that is, of course, not a state. And so he's allowed to do that.
Constitutionally meant to be federalized.
That's right. And they will secretly love being able to go out at night and hang out at their various restaurants and sidewalk cafes and be safe and not worry about their cars getting carjacked and at the same time complain about it. So that's one thing. As soon as this happens, they will move on to the next outrage, but they will try very hard in the next couple of weeks to make this a thing, the way they've done with Epstein. I can't tell you how many people in the media I've read saying, Epstein is the scandal that just won't go away. This time it's different. And now this time the District of Columbia having, bringing down the crime levels thanks to Donald Trump, that's going to be something else as well. And it's going to be a terrible thing. And again, as you mentioned at the beginning of the segment, Dwayne, Trump has made these people lose their minds, and suddenly they're rooting for crime rates not to go down. That's what it comes down to.
Yes. They're actually the pro-crime party now. That's going to be one of their platforms in 2028. We're going to make crime safe again in the country. It's unreal what Donald Trump is able to get the Democrats to do. Vic Mattis at Victorino Mattis online on X, and maybe someday, maybe through an executive order, we can invoke and federalize the Getting Hammered podcast and get another episode or two out. So, amid all the outrage on the left over Donald Trump's action today, federalizing the District of Columbia, invoking Section 740 of the 1973 Home Rule Act, there are lots of hysterical pundits making all the hysterical claims that you would expect. Donald Trump's an authoritarian, he's a dictator, he's this, he's that. Well, even with people like Dana Bash saying, well, the one true violent day in the District of Columbia was J6, I just got to remind my audience that J6 was the worst. Nothing else is quite measured up as bad. If you want to talk about an emergency, it was J6, and that's the only day that we really want to talk about here. Amidst all that, Eli Honig, who is one of CNN's legal contributors, legal analysts, And I think he's probably a center lefty guy. I don't think he's a far left guy from his analysis that I've seen over the years. But he's probably, left of center somewhere. And he came on and said, actually, Donald Trump's kind of on solid legal ground doing this, especially in this city. Cut 24.
Walk us through the sort of legal basis that the president is using to do what he's doing. I talked a little bit about home rule in the last segment, but just in terms of using the National Guard and maybe even federal law enforcement, federal military, I should say, beyond D.C.
So first of all, Dana, the president does have the authority to deploy the National Guard within D.C. That's different than all the states because ordinarily the governors control the National Guards in the state except for in very narrow circumstances. But when it comes to D.C., yes, the president can deploy the National Guard in D.C., and they are allowed to perform law enforcement-like functions. That is a really rare scenario. Usually military is not allowed to perform civilian law enforcement functions. So that's number one. Separately, the president talked about the Home Rule Act. Now, that's the federal law that established essentially the government of D.C. as we know it now. And the section that the president cited, Section 740, does give the president the authority to take over, to federalize the Metro D.C. police force. That's the police force that patrols all the streets of D.C. There's a couple important limitations on that, though. The first one is that there has to be a finding of an emergency, and I'd look for that to be challenged in court. Maybe some of the statistics we've been discussing will be used. And second of all, that federalization can only last a maximum of 30 days. So at this moment, he's within the Constitution on the National Guard, and he is citing an appropriate law on the takeover of the D.C. police, but I would expect lawsuits about that latter one.
He expects lawsuits, and I'm sure that, with the left, that's all they do with Donald Trump is lawfare. That's all they ever done with him is lawfare. Of course they will try to challenge it in court, but the law's on his side. The Constitution's on his side. He's even on the side with the Congressional Act that basically obfuscated and pushed away their responsibilities. He's absolutely right to do what he's doing, and I'm glad he's doing it. There is a lot more to get through in both what the president and his team had to say from the Jim Brady press room and how media and other Democrats are responding to it. Peter Baker, the chief White House correspondent for the New York Times, about an hour ago, puts up this note on X to a New York Times piece. Citing a non-existent crime crisis, Trump plans to take over the Washington, D.C. police and put troops in the streets of the nation's capital. Contrary to his claims, violent crime in D.C. is at a 30-year low. Not 10 minutes after Peter Baker came out with that, it was contradicted by the chairman of the District of Columbia Police Union. Quote, "We completely agree with the president that crime in the District of Columbia is out of control and something needs to be done with it." Now, those two thoughts don't seem to be in it's not congruent. You can't have both be true. And so what we've seen all day long on X is resident after resident, business owner after business owner, putting up their crime stories of what life in D.C. is like over the last few years versus what it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. And it's night and day different. I'm going to actually go back to the district this weekend. I've got to do some work on Hugh's D.C. studio. And so I'm going to see for myself. I'm going to be back there for 4 or 5 days after this guest host week, and I'm going to kind of witness for myself what life is like, because I know what it's like now. It'll be interesting to see what happens when there's actually police on the streets and National Guard doing their thing. But let's get back to what was actually said from the press room. Kash Patel, the FBI director, was just one of many Trump administration officials that had their time behind the podium. Here is what Kash Patel said. Cut 17.
Mr. President, the following is what happens when you let good cops be cops. And I just want to highlight that before I get into Northern Virginia. This year alone, under President Trump's administration, we've had over 4,000 child victims identified and found. That's a 33% increase from the same time period last year. 33% increase. We've had a seizure of 1,500 kilograms of fentanyl up to this date. That is a 25% increase since the same time period last year. And just to put it in perspective, 1,500 kilograms of fentanyl is enough to kill 115 million Americans. 115 million Americans. Cops are getting after it. The FBI has arrested 19,000 people this year alone. Thanks to President Trump's administrations, that's double than where we were this time last year. And we have also arrested 1,600 people who have committed violent acts against children. 270 of them are human traffickers of children. Mr. President, this is what happens when you have great leadership at the Attorney General with Pam Bondi, your administration's priority of protecting the homeland and protecting American citizens and protecting our children, and the murder rates are plummeting. We are now able to report that the murder rate is on track to be the lowest in U.S. history, in modern recorded U.S. history, thanks to this team behind me and President Trump's priorities. And how do we do it? And what are we going to bring to D.C.? What we did in Northern Virginia, thanks to Terry Cole and Governor Youngkin and the team, we stood up a task force out in my Northern Virginia field office, and we said, let's let good cops be cops, let's get them the intelligence and what they need, and let's get the red tape out of their way, and let's get DOJ partnered up with us to bring great prosecutions, and that's exactly what we did. In 1 month, we arrested 545 violent felons. 545 in the state of Virginia, thanks to Governor Youngkin's partnership. And that simplicity in law enforcement is what's coming to Washington, D.C. When you let good cops be cops, when you give them the intel they need, when you work with our Homeland Security Task Force, when you work with Terry and Gaddy and I go way back to Miami. These guys are great leaders of the respective departments and law enforcement capacities. And when you have the DOJ and President Trump driving behind this mission, we are going to clean up Washington, D.C., and we're going to do it the right way, the lawful way, and we're going to make sure Washington, D.C. is safe again. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Attorney General.
Thank you very much.
Glenn Youngkin, the governor of Virginia, the Commonwealth that he mentioned a few times in partnership, has been on the sidelines all day long cheering on. He's done a couple of meaty hits too. But Governor Youngkin is like, bravo, more please. Yes, absolutely, this is the right approach. This is what we need to do. It worked in Northern Virginia. It will work in the district as well. He also mentioned Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, who is now adding on the acting police chief of the Metropolitan Police Department in the district. Here is what Pam Bondi had to say, cut 19.
Let me be crystal clear. Crime in D.C. is ending and ending today. We are going to use every power we have to fight criminals here. President, thank you for caring about our capital. Families come here every summer. Our museums are free. We have the National Zoo. We have the National Gallery. DC should be a place where everyone can come and feel safe. Behind me and to my side, we have some of the best career law enforcement and prosecutors in the country who are ready to take this on. As the president said, Terry Cole is going to be supervising the Metro Police Department. Gaddy Serralta, our U.S. Marshal, is going to be supervising command and control, the entire operation. Our Deputy Attorney General, Todd Blanche, and I will be working with them closely, along with our great FBI Director, Kash Patel. Kash is going to talk to you in a minute about what we did in Virginia recently with Governor Youngkin. Many of you covered that, and it was tremendously successful. Not only that, our secret weapon here in D.C. is U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro, one of the toughest prosecutors and a former judge, and she is going to be talking about juvenile crime, how it's out of control here, and what she's going to do to fight back. No more crime rampant in our beautiful capital. No more teenage girls beating a disabled man to death. No more of that. No more drive-bys. We're going to do everything we can. And working with the ATF Director Driscoll and Commander of the Army, we're going to all work together. That's what we all do in this room. We work together. We fight. Do not underestimate one person in this room. We're going to make DC beautiful. We're going to make DC safe again. One other thing, just at the wharf a few days ago, the area of the wharf, Terry Cole reached out to me, not even nightfall, on the weekend, where so many families and tourists go. A guy's overdosing from fentanyl on a park bench in the middle of families around. They administer Narcan and saved his life. No more of that. The President of the United States is going to clean up D.C., and we're going to be there to help him, and we're going to be successful. Thank you.
I've been to that city probably 12, 15 times. I don't live there. I've never lived there. I never will live in D.C. But I have been to that from the time I was in 8th grade on the trek that all kids get to do through school. They have their DC week. And I've been going back to DC all the way through my adult life as part of my radio profession, going back to conferences, doing remotes back there. I have seen the city where you could walk around as long as you stayed within the main complex of DC. You could walk around and never feel like you had a problem at all. That's not what it's been like for the last several years. And everybody knows it. Pam Bondi is absolutely right. It's time. They've got the law on their side, and it's really refreshing to see Donald Trump and his team take this seriously and take it on. It needs to happen. Dwayne Patterson in for Hugh Hewitt. We'll be back with Bethany Mandel right after the break. Stick around.
Hold it right there. I'm back from vacation. Not really. I pre-recorded this on Friday. It's my Relief Factor segment because I take Relief Factor with me on vacation just like I take it every day on this program. And we're going to remind you every hour, even when I'm out on vacation, that Relief Factor does indeed work. If you take it every single day, you will feel much better because it works with your body's anti-inflammatory system to reduce the minor aches and pains that come with exercise and aging. You should be doing the former. You're definitely doing the latter. Every day, Relief Factor means more and more to a comfortable life. Stop using the over-counter meds. Try it the old-fashioned way. Icarian curcumin with Veritron Omega. And the starter pack, $19.95, gets you 3 weeks of Relief Factor. You take 3 on the first day, every day for the first week, 2 on the second week, every day on the second week, and then 1 on the third week, and then forever after. 1-800, the number 4 in the word relief, 1-800, the number 4 in the word relief, or visit their website, relieffactor.com. Find that starter pack for $19.95, less than $1 a day at relieffactor.com.
Joined by Bethany Mandel, at Bethany Shondark on X, but the co-founder of the Mom Wars Substack, the co-author of Stolen Youth, and prophetess. I say prophetess because last week in the New York Post, she puts out this column. DC crime is out of control. A federal takeover could be the only solution. That was on August 6th. Let me read you the first couple of graphs and then turn it over to the person that called her shot a week ahead of time. Last year, I first proposed to my husband the idea of allowing our preteen daughter to ride the Washington, D.C. Metro alone. Boy, that's a mistake. Didn't used to be, but it's a mistake now. She wants to take Irish dance classes in the city, and a weekly drive in from the Maryland suburbs is too much for the family schedule. Then came story after story of stabbings, gang violence, and even a shooting on the Metro. My proposal went back on the shelf. Bethany Mandel, that time may be coming sooner rather than later where she actually can go on that trip. What do you make of this?
That would be exciting. This proposal has been on and off the shelf for the last year and a half. And it was funny the first time not funny, you know what I'm saying. Ironic, the first time I proposed it, there was a shooting at our local station the next day. And my husband showed me his phone and said, "Remember how I said no? Now it's very much no." Yeah. And this is the situation in DC. It's, it's safer in the areas around, the Capitol, around the museums, all of those sort of really central tourist hubs. But for me, I look at like parents of the intern who sent their son here for an adventure and he got shot. It's at the point where people they don't feel safe moving here. They don't feel safe doing anything but traveling outside of those, heavily policed tourist spots because the crime is out of control.
So Donald Trump in 2024 faced a big hurdle that I wasn't convinced early in the year. I was later, but in the first part of 24, I wasn't convinced he was ever going to be able to win back the suburban moms and seniors largely, and some independents that he had lost seemingly forever after the 2020 crack up in the election, that all that J6 stuff that followed. So I didn't think you would be able to do it, but the 5 planks, if you want to distill Donald Trump's 24 campaign message into 5 major planks to try to win back and restore hope and restore confidence with that suburban mom vote, of which you are definitely a part of, what were those 5 planks? Can you name off the top of your head?
So immigration, crime, Maha was massive. All the health stuff was huge.
Yep.
Education. How many did I just say? 4?
4. You missed number 1. You missed the big one. Inflation, right?
Inflation. Yes. Oh my God.
Getting inflation.
And
Cost of
gas
living.
prices are all wrapped in there too.
Oh, yeah. All that. Food prices. All that was wrapped up into the inflation cost of living. But you're right. That was the 5 planks, and that's what convinced people to say, okay, well, what's working with Biden and Harris, that's not working. We need to go back to try something that is at least a known here. And so everybody's reacting to the inflation stuff, and they're reacting to all the different planks that he's done so far, what he's done with the Department of Education. They don't like at all what Robert Kennedy's doing. Some people really do like it. But, there's all these different phases of which the left is trying to attack Donald Trump on. But the one maybe sole remaining plank that did not get attacked yet was the issue of crime. And by Donald Trump going at this today, it's right in the wheelhouse of what he promised he would do. He's going to deliver on it. And at the same time, he's forced Democrats to take the 10% or the 15% of an 85-15 issue again, Bethany. It's remarkable.
Yeah. Well, he knows that their strategy on all of these things is gaslighting. So, when we've talked about education, the schools are fine. When we've talked about inflation, remember that 4th of July post that your hot dogs are only a couple cents more expensive this year versus last year?
Yes.
Yes. But I think my favorite gaslighting is now tied. The Maha stuff was great because there was an amazing New York Times column where they compared Fruit Loops in America versus Canada, and they said, all the ingredients are the same except for these 15 that you can't pronounce. Besides those, everything is exactly the same. That was my favorite gaslighting from Democrats until now, who have very certainly assured me that Washington, D.C. is the safest city in the world. And I'm here for the gaslighting. I think it's great. They should go all in.
I totally agree. Are you concerned at all about the? Oh, see, this is it. We said he was going to be a dictator. We said he was going to be an authoritarian. This is what was coming. We warned about this. He's going to take over every city in America now. Does that concern you?
I think they should continue running around calling him a fascist in their real names, on posters, everything. It is so laughable, especially, by the way, to immigrants who have come here escaping actual fascism and actual dictatorship, because what Trump is doing in DC is protecting those Americans, protecting Americans who live in those sort of borderline neighborhoods that are not quite that safe. And, Americans see that, DC is not safe enough, and that this is not a dictatorial move. This is just trying to keep people safe who live in these not so great neighborhoods.
I want to play quickly Cut 21. This is Judge Jeanine Pirro, who is now the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, from the press room today. Cut 21.
Here's the problem. Assuming that they're 17 years, older than 17 years old, I can get the case. If they're under 18 years of age, I can only get the case if it's murder, rob one, rape, even if they shoot a gun but don't kill you, I can't get it. So the law has to be changed. As the president said, cashless bail, that has to be changed. All right, then even assuming I get the case, I get jurisdiction, I get a conviction, the DC Council has given the judges the ability to give probation on shootings. And so then it's up to them. All of these things, the Youth Rehabilitation Incarceration Reduction Act, and now they want to seal records. So if we work hard, we get a conviction, they want to wipe it out. So that needs all to be changed. Okay,
Bethany Mandel, she wants to go after teen violence in real, tangible ways. What do you make of this as a mom?
This is exactly what makes me feel unsafe about having my daughter ride the Metro, because the vast majority of the violence on the Metro, but also the carjackings, are happening at the hands of kids. They're teenagers. And I wish that they would talk about the connection of, Democrats keeping the school closed led to the radicalization and the violence that we're seeing now. They're completely connected. And, Donald Trump is going to try to swoop in and see if he can at least protect the rest of us from these kids. But this is the situation for a reason, and every step of the way Democrats have led to the scenario that we're watching right now in D.C.
At Bethany Shondark on X, and definitely subscribe to the Mom Wars Substack. It's a terrific resource, and check out that New York Post column from last week. Bethany Mandel, thanks for being here. Look, we've been talking almost all day about crime and safety in the District of Columbia, and maybe where you're at as well as a harbinger of things to come. But you're also not safe online either, and you really know you're not. You know what the stats actually are for online cybersecurity? Every 2 seconds in this country, somebody's identity gets stolen. I mean, it's actually unbelievable how fast and prevalent it is all over the place. How much man hours or woman hours does it take to unwind the damage if your identity gets stolen? The average is between 100 and 200 hours to try and get all your data and all your name, documents, everything back under your control again. It's an expensive process. The problem is you can't always prosecute them because the originators are somewhere in some unpronounceable country, Stan. That's where WebRoot comes into play. WebRoot is the gold standard for personal security. WebRoot.com/Hewitt is where you go to get 50% off their total protection program, or WebRoot's Essentials when you go to WebRoot.com/Hewitt. Look, you get a password manager, system optimizer, identity protection, advanced dark web monitoring, rapid credit alerts, and up to $1 million in reimbursements for stolen funds if the identity thieves do claim you as a victim. Check it out. Go to webroots.com, WebRoot, singular, WebRoot.com/Hewitt, and avail yourself of the opportunity to at least give yourself some protection against identity theft. Let's go back to the press conference today because a couple of the other cabinet secretaries weighed in as well. Doug Burgum, who is the Interior Secretary, is also part of his purview is the U.S. Park Police, Capitol Police, and that's different than the Metropolitan Police Department for the District of Columbia. These are the ones that guard the monuments and the Capitol and things like that. And the Park Police are pretty thrilled at how things are going right now. Cut number 20.
On behalf of the U.S. Park Police, this is the oldest federal police force in the nation. They were formed in 1791 by none other than President George Washington. They've got the awesome responsibility of protecting our nation's most sacred monuments. The National Mall, Washington Monument, Jefferson Memorial, Lincoln Memorial, Statue of Liberty, and out west, the Presidio and the Golden Gate area. These folks have tens of millions of visitors a year, the kind of people that President Trump's talking about that come from around the country and around the world to see our sacred and learn about our history and our sacred monuments. They've been doing a fantastic job, but they are so pleased, the rank and file, that President Trump is now allowing them to enforce the law. As those of you that live in the city may know that the circles and the triangle parks that are spread throughout D.C. are actually federal park property. So the U.S. Park Police also have responsibility for that. These became littered with homeless camps under the Biden administration. All of you saw that. Since President Trump's executive order on March 27th, making D.C. safe and beautiful again, the U.S. Park Police have removed over 70 homeless camps. And President Trump also talked about beautification. They're stopping and enforcing the laws against graffiti on our monuments. They've removed over 80 specific attacks against our history with graffiti on our monuments. So they continue to do a great job, whether it's in their vehicles, on foot, or on the mounted police that you see around the National Mall. And President Trump, they thank you. The rank and file is so happy to be enforcing the law again. Thank you for your leadership. And they're excited about the announcement you're making today.
Thank you. Very good. Great job you're doing. Thank you very much.
Yes, great job, Secretary Burgum, and more permits, please. Get some more drilling permits. We need more leasing. We need more drilling. Faster, please. Pete Hegseth, the Pentagon Secretary, was also there. Let's at least play the first part of Cut 18.
At your direction this morning, we've mobilized the D.C. National Guard. It'll be operationalized by the Secretary of the Army, Dan Driscoll, through the D.C. Guard.
Let's stop there. That's all you really need, isn't it? That's really all you want. The National Guard will be on the streets by the end of the week. Again, I cannot wait. I'm going to have a catbird seat tomorrow producing this show for Kurt Schlichter, who was in the National Guard, commanded a outfit in the National Guard, California National Guard, at the time of the riots out here in the Golden State. The National Guard knows how to restore order. They're really they're very good at it. I can't wait to hear what Kurt Schlichter has to say about it. He will be behind this very microphone tomorrow, so join us for that. The reverberations of Donald Trump's announcement today at the White House continue to resonate all over media, largely, and the country at large. There was, I mentioned to you a New York Times piece by Peter Baker, and he's saying, Trump's all wet on this. Crime stats are down. It's not a problem. He's creating a crisis where there isn't a crisis, trying to downplay crime because he doesn't like Donald Trump. But that narrative amongst the resistance media is kind of starting to break apart a little bit. There is an anchor on ABC News just within the last, 30 minutes or so. I saw this from Libs of TikTok, and I wish I could properly attribute who the anchor is. I don't know who this anchor is. I don't watch ABC News enough. But this is what was on the air on their national news just a few minutes ago, Cut 30.
We've been talking so much about the numbers, and usually that's how you play devil's advocate, is you talk about, stats say crime is down. However, I can tell you firsthand here in downtown D.C. where we work, right here around our bureau, just in the past 6 months, there were 2 people shot. 1 person died, literally 2 blocks down here from the bureau. It was within the last 2 years that I actually was jumped walking just 2 blocks down from here. And then just this morning, one of my coworkers said her car was stolen a block away from the bureau. So we can talk about the numbers going down, but crime is happening every single day because we're all experiencing it firsthand while working in.
Now, here's the thing about crime. It's a feel thing. It's a perception thing. If you don't feel safe, you can throw a bunch of numbers at that person and say, see, compared to this year, prosecutions of rape are down 36%. But if you don't feel safe, you don't feel safe, right? And the reason you don't feel safe is because when you go out, you get accosted. And it doesn't matter if you're in media or not. Chris Murphy, Democrat senator from, where is he from? Connecticut, made a selfie video. And yes, he went there because when you're a Democrat these days, argument is just Donald Trump can't be right, so we've got to embrace whatever he is against. Here is Chris Murphy, Cut 26.
Let's be clear about what's going on here. Donald Trump says that he is taking control of the Washington, D.C. police force today.
because violent crime is out of control in the capital city. But you know what are the two cities in America with the highest rates of homicide? It's not Washington, D.C., it's St. Louis, Missouri, and Memphis, Tennessee. Those are cities in two states run by Republican governors. In fact, if you look at the states that have the highest murder rates, the highest rates of violent crime, by and large, they are Republican states, not Democratic states. States like Connecticut, Massachusetts, California, amongst the safest states in the nation. This isn't about the safety of the people of Washington, D.C. This is about a president who is desperate to distract the conversation in this country away from what he is doing, to monetize the White House, to make himself rich off of his position, to distract this country from the Epstein debacle, his attempt to try to shield the rich and powerful from accountability, and the healthcare crisis that is coming in this country when millions of people get thrown off their healthcare insurance and millions more in just a few months have their premiums jacked up because of what Donald Trump has done to try to pass tax cuts for the wealthy by throwing people off their healthcare. So understand, this has nothing to do with the safety of people in Washington, D.C. The most violent cities are in Republican states, and there's no federal government, there's no National Guard, there's no U.S. military coming into those cities. This is not about safety. This is all about trying to distract from Donald Trump's corruption and his thievery.
Okay, so there is Chris Murphy, just pitch perfect Democrat, trying to make lemonade out of the lemons here that he is handed. Here's the problem. The District of Columbia is a city. He is trying to make state comparisons. He's trying to play red state game when we're talking about what's going on in cities. He mentioned Memphis. He mentioned St. Louis. Both of those are big cities. Both of those do happen to be in red states. The District of Columbia is not in a state. It is a city. So the analogy doesn't quite ring true. But since he's talking about those cities, who is the mayor running the government of the city of Memphis? Why, that would be one Paul Young is the mayor of Memphis. And yes, it has an excruciatingly high crime rate. You do not want to be walking around the streets of Memphis at night. Now, do you want to take a stab at which political party Mayor Young affiliates himself with? Why, that would be the Democratic Party. In St. Louis, Kara Spencer is the mayor of St. Louis. And again, St. Louis resides in a red state. It has a Republican governor. But Kara Spencer, running St. Louis, that does have an inner city crime problem, to be sure, to be certain. Which political party does Kara Spencer belong to again? Why, she would be also a Democrat. So apparently what Chris Murphy is calling for is red state governors sending in the National Guard into blue states that are out of control because Democrats can't run them. Isn't that what he's actually trying to say? While trying to distract and point everything back to anything else that might stick to Trump? It's delusional. It's just beyond ridiculous. When we come back, we will have a few closing thoughts and maybe one more clip or two. I think the president has a response to what Chris Murphy has to say, and we'll cover that right after the break. By the way, if you want to know a little bit more about me as the producer of the show, I actually do have a podcast of my own. It's called Dwayne's World. You can go to DwayneWorld.com, D-U-A-N-E World.com. It's got links to about a little over a year worth of podcasts I've done. Plus, it's got links to all my Hot Air columns. I write for my buddy Ed Morrissey at Hot Air, and that's usually 2-3 times a week. So you can kind of stay up to speed on what I'm doing if you so desire. Going back to that clip by Chris Murphy, he mentioned that healthcare premiums are about ready to skyrocket and this and that and all the other dire stuff. Well, he's kind of right in the sense that there is a fix that needs to happen that Congress knows and is working on. And our friends at Americans for a Balanced Budget at StopHealthCostHikes.com. That's StopHealthCostHikes.com. It knows about it and is trying to get Congress to do a patch so that tax credits for Americans who buy their own health insurance are covered. You can go to StopHealthCostHikes.com and learn a lot more about it. But if these tax credits aren't tweaked in a subsequent package by Congress and signed by Donald Trump, 24 million Americans actually could face skyrocketing health care costs, and millions may lose coverage entirely. That's kind of what Chris Murphy is talking about, but the patch that he wants to do is not at all what Americans for a Balanced Budget are looking for. You can learn all sorts of details by going to StopHealthCostHikes.com, and we encourage you to do so. Now, I want to close with a warning from Donald Trump. He is on absolute constitutional grounds to do what he's doing in the District of Columbia. But he also had a shot across the bow, if you will, for other blue cities and or blue states that don't get a handle on crime and clean up a little bit. Here's Donald Trump, cut 14.
And we're going to have the same thing here. But then I'm going to look at New York in a little while. Let's do this. Let's do this together. Let's see. It's going to go pretty quickly. And if we need to, we're going to do the same thing in Chicago, which is a disaster. We have a mayor there who's totally incompetent. He's an incompetent man. And we have an incompetent governor there. Pritzker's an incompetent. His family threw him out of the business, and he ran for governor. And now I understand he wants to be president. But I noticed he lost a little weight, so maybe he has a chance. You know, you never know what happens. But Pritzker's a gross incompetent guy, thrown out of the family business. But when I look at Chicago and I look at L.A., if we didn't go to L.A. 3 months ago, L.A. would be burning like the part that didn't burn. If he would have allowed the water to come down, which I told him about in my first term, I said, you're going to have problems. Let it come down. We actually sent in our military to have the water come down into L.A. They still didn't want it to come down after the fires. But that was it. We have it coming down. But hopefully L.A. is watching. That mayor also. The city's burning.
So will he or won't he? I don't know. But what's fascinating is the rhetoric is continuing to heat up. Gavin Newsom in California said, we're going to redistrict and we're going to throw out 5 Republicans. We're going to carve them out of existence. Greg Abbott, Texas governor, just on CNN a couple of minutes ago said, well, you know, we've got the ability to carve out 10 Democrats in Texas. And we may do that. And we'll see your call your raise and raise you another 5 seats. Lots straight ahead on the next edition of the Hugh Hewitt Show. Dwayne Patterson in for Hugh. Kurt's in tomorrow. Join us, won't you? See ya.